Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Lexington Times and chairman of the board of LexMedia. I'm here for another edition of Coffee with the Candidates. Today we're here with Johann Lindborg. Johann is a candidate for school committee in this March 5th election coming up in just a week or so. So we hope folks understand the date of the election. It's also the date of the state primary. So we'll have two elections. It's Tuesday as opposed to Monday when we normally hold town elections. So Johann, I first saw you when you were, at the Indian Americans of Lexington panel, which I kind of like the format of that panel. Instead of having a debate between it was like the whole, I love seeing all of the candidates for every office along, so that everybody could get a sense of it, because I think a lot of it, there's a lot that sows in between. When we talk about the high school, clearly that's something that concerns the select board, and concerns the school committee and the planning board. So it's important, I think, to hear from everybody on these issues. So let me first ask, what motivated you to decide to run for a school committee?
Well, thank you, Jim, for having me here. And this is the first time I'm ever running for a position like this. So I'm picking up and learning as I go along. Mm-hmm. Reason I'm running is I feel like there has been over the time less focus on academic performance in schools, and I think while overall there's a lot of things that are good in Lexington schools, there are things that we could do better. Mm-hmm. So academic performance is one, more focus on that. Another one would be transparency, to be upfront with what's being taught and shared in school, and I think that's pretty straightforward there, that the best ground for academic success is to have parents right. that are involved in and engaged, and that they are informed. And thirdly, as you brought up, the new high school and how that is important to different committees in town. I think it's important there that we think about budget as well. I want we have an effective budget control. Mm-hmm. And as we have that, I think there is one area that I still think we need to pay extra attention to, and that's literacy, which then comes back to academic performance.
Right. Let's dig down on the first thing you mentioned, things we could do better. What are some of those things?
Well, if we look at academic performance, let me bring up a couple of examples. When my daughter was in middle school, the grading system was changed. So the top grade, which was exceeding performance, was expectations, was taken away. Mm-hmm. So the top grade you can get was meeting performance. So if you had 100% right on a test, your grade says meeting performance. Mm-hmm. Is that motivating to a student? Is that communicating to the student and to the parents what is going on?
It sounds like what they're saying is it's adequate, rather than, am I getting that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you could put whatever label on it as you want, right. But the thing is, I think you're not appropriately communicating what is actually happening. I talked to several parents whose kids had the grade meeting expectations, which was the top grade, and then they moved on to high school, and suddenly they were all C students.
Right. Okay.
And the parents had no idea.
Right. Yeah, I could see where that would be a major concern.
Yes.
Transparency. Let's take these issues, one at a time. Transparency.
Well, before we move on to transparency, okay. maybe another example on focus on academic performance. Another example is that I learned that in high school, I think in 8th grade, everybody had to take honors grade in English. There wasn't an AP, there wasn't a standard. Everybody was forced into one level. And I don't think that's a fair solution for the students. Mm-hmm. There are some that are extremely good and would be stimulated by taking an AP level. There are some that are not good in English and would do better but having a standard class. Right. My philosophy is set students for success.
Right.
If you set kids up for success, if they learn that if I put down some work, I get a good grade. If I get a good grade, I'll be rewarded. I can come home and show something. That's how you create joy in learning.
Right, and a lot of kids at that point, when they're starting to be, when they're freshmen, sophomore, and they're starting to think about colleges and which colleges they want to apply to, and if they're starting to reach the top tier colleges, grades are important, and those colleges will be able to look at the transcripts and see what if they got an A in a standard class versus an A in an AP class, that's going to stand out. But it does not put a student who is seeking to go to a, if they're not looking to go to Harvard, but they're looking to go to a good university or college, it gives them an opportunity to grab a better grade if they're in a curriculum that sort of meets their ability.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that flexibility is very important, and it allows kids to grow and have success. So yes.
Good. So transparency. I know transparency is always an issue. I hear a lot of people talk about transparency, no matter what office you're running for. One of the reasons we do what we do here at LexMedia, and we broadcast, hundreds and hundreds of meetings a year, government meetings, is because government, we believe, should be transparent. And it can't be any more transparent than giving somebody an opportunity to watch from home and actually see what's going on in these meetings. And I know it goes beyond that, because there are a lot of things that happen in the school administration. We didn't have the same situation Newton did, but we were close to it. We were a year or so negotiating a new contract with teachers, and there was some tension there, and there was the potential to end up in a Newton type situation, because I know our teachers, they were deserving, and they were digging down and demanding the respect they deserve, the money they deserve. So when you talk about transparency in the school system, what exactly do you want to draw attention to?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different things. So one thing is, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there was a discussion around serious talks last summer, where there was a big public meeting of the school committee, and I think there was like 300 people there, and there was a lot of presentations and talks. And
it was about the curriculum.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of questions, what is being taught and what is being communicated to the students. And there was one quote that stood out to me there, and that was being told to the parents, and it was, quote, the kids are ready to hear this information we are presenting. You as parents are not, and we will not share with you what we teach the kids.
Really?
And quite honestly, that's not acceptable in my book. Well, in the society I envision in, where we're open and welcoming, it's where we try to get parents involved as lot as possible. To get better outcomes, we should involve and share with parents what we teach.
Right. And that kind of comes to your third point about involving parents in the process. How, Lexington we're fortunate to have a very good school system here. It could,
it's one of the reasons I moved here.
But we, like you say, we could always do better. And I know a lot of it happens at home. Most learning happens at home. You're instructed during the course of the day, and you're motivated, and hopefully you get involved with extracurriculars that help augment the learning process. But the nurturing at home, in terms of, staying on track and making sure you're getting homework done, or being able to have conversations about some of the things they're learning in school, it doesn't always take place at home. We've got, post-pandemic, things have slowed down a little bit. People are working from home. Prior to that, parents were, you were two professional parents out working, coming home, kids running off to athletics or other extracurriculars, and by the time you get a chance to sit down and digest it all, the day is over. So how do you propose that we get more parents involved? Or is there a prescription for this, or do you just think you motivate them through through messaging through the child? Do you do it more directly to the parents? What do you think?
Oh, I think there's a lot of different things that can go into that. I mean, the number one thing is sharing with parents what is being taught. This is what we're going to talk about, so that parents know about it, especially as you have younger kids. We talk about first, second, third grader, where the kids are in a more vulnerable age than as you grow up. It's interesting you brought up the pandemic. So my son Cooper, who is at Clark School, he has Down syndrome, and when the pandemic hit and we started doing remote learning, he has such a personality that he didn't take to doing things over screen.
Right.
So basically, I had to give up what I was doing, and I got materials from the teachers, and I sat down and I tried to be a teacher. I'm not qualified to be a teacher. It's a very important job, but I tried to do my best to give him as much stimuli as I could. So there was a lot of very different solutions that people had to do during that time.
Right. Well, you know, you talk about being prepared, being a teacher. You triple majored in economics. Let's tell us a little bit about your background and what do you think, what you bring to the table that would help you, sort of, if you were to be elected to the school.
Well, I was born in Sweden. I'm a dual U.S.-American citizen. I moved here in 2001. After I left high school in Sweden, I did 1 year of military service, as at the time everybody in Sweden had to do, was mandatory. And then I started my formal education up in very northern part of Sweden. If you think about the same level as Fairbanks, Alaska, that's how far up it is, about 200 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle.
Wow.
So there I triple majored in economics, business administration, and marketing. My heart was focused on economics, so I did my graduate courses there at the University of Umeå.
Great.
My professional background, though, is not in economics. It's in pharmaceutical drug development. So I have worked for 16 years at Eli Lilly and Company. I've worked at Avid Radiopharmaceuticals, Biogen, and I've done a lot of consulting. I've always focused on diseases that has to do with the central nervous system, such as depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, Alzheimer's disease, eating disorders, name it. I worked on it.
Let's talk a little bit about the, the recent series of articles from the Boston Globe that cast I don't know if it was a pall, but it was not a favorable piece in terms of where Lexington, among other communities, we're not the only one, but we were singled out in these articles, where they say that we are having problems with literacy and our kids in the schools. And, they point to a few different things, and, it really speaks to the curriculum about learning to read. There are a lot of different, methods. When I went to school here in Lexington, I went to Harrington School for elementary school, and they employed phonetics and other things to help in the learning process. When you saw those Boston Globe articles, what did it say to you? What was your response?
Well, number one, I was surprised to see that the state had a very strong opinion, and then the school districts had a very different, some, not all, but some school districts had a very different opinion about literacy and how the education should go on. I'm a little surprised that the phonics-based methodology, as far as I understand, have a lot of evidence behind it, supported by very good evidence that has, for some reasons, gone to the background and haven't been used as much as it probably should be. And when you look at literacy in Lexington, it is overall looks not too bad.
Right.
But when you go in and look at different groups, you see a different pattern.
Right. So
the kids with dyslexia and the special needs community and black students, we see very different different rules. And make sure that I get the right numbers. I just was looking at these the other day,
Right.
and I was surprised,
Right.
and I was more than surprised. I had no idea. If you look at ELA for black students, 6th to 8th graders, 75% did not meet expectations.
That's a significant number.
And-
I was surprised when I read that in the Globe.
And that, if you then look at 2017, that was 52%. So we're seeing, not only do we see in a very, very low number, we're seeing a worsening of the trend.
Declining, right.
And we look at black kids for 6th to 8th graders, 45% are not meeting expectations. And that was 19% in 2017. So we have large gaps here, and the trends are going in the wrong direction.
Right. And this goes back to doing some things better. That you
And
talked
maybe
about
doing
it.
something different.
Oh, different. Yeah.
And then number one is figure out what is the problem here. Maybe it's more than one problem.
Right.
For complicated issues, there are often more than one explanation.
Right.
And I had a meeting yesterday with the Black Parent Association in Lexington, and I said, professionally, I was a market researcher. I did market research on $5 billion brands at Eli Lilly and Company. I look at this and I say, I need to understand this. If you're up for it, I will sit down and interview every single black parent in this community. I'll talk to the teachers that worked in 2017 and I was working now and try to figure out what is going on here.
Right.
I'm upset. This
Right.
can't stand.
Right. And we can't just sweep it under the rug
No.
because the majority of students are doing well. We can't leave behind certain segments of the school population.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. It's about being a team player. Well, as I told you, when I did my military service in Sweden, if a teammate was down, you did what you could to help him. In fact, the guy right next to me who was sergeant of the 5th group, I was sergeant of the 6th group of a recon platoon, he had an interesting life experience. He was found by a Norwegian missionary couple out in the desert in Ethiopia, sitting by himself, completely alone. They rescued him, take him in. There was no family, no one around. So they set his birthday as 17. Mai in Norway, which is the 4th of July equivalent.
Okay.
And somehow he got adopted into Sweden and ended up in the bunk next to me. An extraordinary guy. Both of us wanted to continue. Well, both of us were considering going into the west point of Sweden, which is the Karlberg school. He couldn't formally apply because one of his school grades did not look good.
Really?
He had been a little bit too much party, a little bit less serious. So I said to him, hey, I'll help you. You can take a complimentary course while we're here for this year and I'll help you study. And he did. He got his grade, he applied, and he got in.
And you got in. Well, great.
He
I mean,
went on to become a full-fledged officer in the Swedish Army.
Right.
And that's my point here. When you
Right.
see someone that needs help, you stretch out your hand, you try to figure out what is wrong, and then you employ evidence-based methods to fix it.
Right.
And that's my philosophy.
Well, when I was at Harrington, I mentioned that, there was a woman named Mrs. Evangelista who was actually tragically killed while she was on a power walk. She was hit by a car.
Wow.
But this was later, many years after she retired. But she touched many lives, and mine in particular. We used to teach foreign languages in our schools in grade 3. And
Really?
And we did. And I had to forego going to French, and I went to extra reading because I identified that I had some reading issues and comprehension issues. Later on in life, I was diagnosed with ADD, not ADHD, but just simple ADD. And then it all started to make sense. But I wanted to study English, and I did. I went and studied English in college and graduated with high honors. But a lot of it comes from the fact that they identified a problem early, they dealt with it, and it worked. And then I think they need to employ some of this again with some of these students. If you're looking at segments of the population that are problematic. But I'm not running for school committee, so
I couldn't agree with you more, Jim. I mean, it's so important here when you see there is an area of need to really take off your blinders, sit down and come in with open eyes and try to understand what is the driving factors here.
Right.
And then when you understand that, apply it. Okay. And have naturally a flexibility in the budget to be able to do that.
Yeah. We only have a couple more minutes. I wish we had more time.
Me too.
We had this. I'm enjoying this conversation. We have so many candidates to interview. That's the upside of a vibrant election year when so many offices are being challenged. And I believe, even if we've got good incumbents, I believe it's important to challenge the status quo. Regardless, having an election that's what America is built on. So I wanted to just talk briefly, and I know we have very little time to do this, but I do want to put it on the table. Let's talk about the high school, because we couldn't have a conversation without talking about the high school. It's going to be the biggest public project Lexington has ever undertaken. And what are some of your thoughts on the way we're approaching it, or how we need to approach it? Or just general thoughts about the school?
Well, number one, I would like to say I'm thrilled to live in a community that are putting money and resources, funding behind education. Education is, to me, incredibly important to have new adequate buildings, sets the ground for having a really successful education. The flip side of that is, of course, well, how much does it cost?
Right.
We all have to be very careful with the budget, and we'll have to be very wise how we spend our money going forward.
Because it could be very expensive. I mean, it's going to be very expensive. Not could be.
Yep.
But you're right. If we approach it differently, I mean, one of the things that we find is by kicking it down the road. And I'm so glad that it's finally on the table, because as you kick it down the road, it just gets exponentially more expensive, and it's hard to contain those costs. They're out of our control for the most part. But there are things we can do to sort of keep it within control, and then provide the students the building and the facility they deserve. So anyway.
Yes.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear from you. Why don't you tell folks, you have we were talking about, you have a website. How can people find out more about it? They can go onto your website and learn a little bit more about you.
Yes, you can go onto my website, lindborgforschoolcommittee.com. There's some dashes in between. If you just Google Lindborg for School Committee, it should come up as the first choice. And if you go on there, you'll find my email address. If you want to reach out and email me, get in contact with me.
Great. Well, I wish I had more time. You're a very interesting guy. You obviously bring something different to the table, and I wish you all the best in the election.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us today. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johan.